Well, you have to have a scare. What was the scare? Well, it was, they now have bombs in the underwear and we can't detect them through the previous screening processes. Well, all the experts said that there was no way that so-called bomb could ever go off. It was not really a bomb. And it's known that the person who had the bomb was walked on board the plane by security, even though he had no passport. So quite clearly they wanted him on the plane. Why did they want him on the plane? Because he was some kind of dupe, that they had a fake bomb, and he was a dupe thinking he was going to bring down the plane, and it would play into the hands of marketing these machines. Now, I don't really know that's true, but you can see it certainly fits the picture better than the notion that Al-Qaeda, who was so powerful it could outwit all 16 American intelligence agencies, Mossad, all the intelligence agencies of Europeans, NORAD, the National Security Council, Air Traffic Control, the Air Force, bring down the World Trade Center towers, attack the Pentagon, defeat airport security 4 times 1 hour. Anything this powerful is not going to resort to a shoe bomb or an underwear bomb or a shampoo bottle of water bomb. Look, Joe, what is all the emphasis on transportation? There are so many soft targets in the United States, attacks on which would be far more devastating than bringing down an airliner. Look, the entire electric grid. I mean, they could cause unimaginable chaos. You have the shopping malls. They could kill far more people with bombs in shopping malls than they can on airliners. Or they don't even need to be, as I wrote recently, terrorists want to blow us up. They don't need to be on an airplane. All they got to do is get in line where the crowds are concentrated going through TSA. There's hundreds and hundreds of people. Go there and set off their bombs. So the whole thing strikes me as an orchestrated, fakey thing.
Yeah, it's clearly orchestrated as far as I'm concerned. But I know that some die-hard believers in the official story would state that this is in fact what terrorists want. They want to disrupt our ability to travel, to create longer queues at airports and force us to have to go through humiliating pat-downs, not to mention getting scanned with potentially harmful radiation. And that's all a bit of a come down as far as I'm concerned from their alleged goals of wanting to kill as many infidels as possible. So it's a bit of a stretch, and it makes much more sense that it's about the government wanting to control the population for some unknown reason.
It could be an unknown reason. It could just be bureaucracies. Once the bureaucracy starts, they run amok. And anybody who gets the least bit of power wants to use it.
Absolutely.
Once the police here were militarized, now they're a threat to the public. There are endless YouTube videos of American police tasering 10-year-olds and 90-year-old grandmothers and beating up women. And why are they doing this? Because, first of all kind of police agencies attract pathological people.
Psychopaths.
Bullies, people who want to assert themselves. And they tend to drive out the good ones. Yeah. And so bureaucracies can grow for their own reasons, and it doesn't necessarily imply that the government is up to something. Though what I know about governments, I wouldn't be at all surprised that they're up to all sorts of things.
But if you were to hypothesize as to what ulterior motive the government might have for implementing this police state infrastructure, what would you say? I mean, is it possible that it's setting the stage for something in the future?
I don't know the answer, but I think that if people would pay attention and think, and there could be open discussion, we might be able to get to it. And if the Congress was brave enough to actually start holding hearings and asking some of these questions. And look, here's another good indication that terrorists really don't even exist. Certainly not in the United States. We're not overrun with any terrorists, because if you really were a terrorist, who would you be mad at? You would be most angry at those Americans who caused all the destruction and death in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? And at those Americans who permitted the Israelis to cause all the destruction and death in Lebanon and Palestine and Gaza. And who are those Americans? We know who they are. There's Rumsfeld, there's Wolfowitz, there's Pearl, there's Feig, there's Libby. Do you see what I'm saying? They're all known. None of them have protection. None of them have Secret Service protection. Only the president, the vice president. They're all just walking around. It'd be very easy to assassinate them. And yet there's been no attempt on a single one of them. Now, if there really was a terrorist organization in the United States that justifies homeland security, all of these people would have been assassinated in 1 hour of one day, just to make the statement. It would have been a powerful statement for terrorists to make. Blowing up an airliner with a shoe bomb or underwear bomb doesn't make any statement. But if you had these terrorists, surely they would have identified who is responsible for all the dead Muslims and the displaced Muslims and the aggressive policies. And they would have taken them out. You know, in the book that Mario Puzo wrote, The Godfather, everyone knows the movie probably. When Michael Corleone finally moves against the other mafia families, they're all wiped out the same minute. Well, this would be a simple thing. But you can see none of these neoconservatives are the slightest bit worried. If they're capable of 9/11, then they're certainly capable of executing a dozen neoconservatives in one fell swoop. And just imagine if they were to do that and then simultaneously announce that every member of the government would be next, right down to the lowest GS. There's no way the United States can protect all the members of the government and the Congress and the Senate and the courts. It would take millions of people assigned to them as Secret Service agents. And so the whole thing nothing rings true about any of this. And so the kind of question that you raise, like what is the real agenda, is a legitimate question. I don't know the answer.
Well, it's certainly something that's been taxing me a lot, no pun intended, over the years. And when I looked at the laws that have been passed and the laws that have been shredded in the process of imposing the kind of police state and surveillance societies we see in the US and the UK, for example, I find it hard to accept that this is only a case of the institutionalization of a bureaucracy gone bad, although I think that is a factor. But it seems to me that there's a definite plan behind these measures, and one thing that occurred to me was that it could be preparation for some kind of social upheaval that these government types are aware of. For example, this summer, severe weather over North America, Russia and Asia caused significant damage to crops and resulted in a spike in food prices. So I'm wondering if there's some knowledge in government circles about the possibility of social upheaval as a result of essentially climate change and the threat it poses to the food supply, and that it is for this reason that these kind of controls of movement and a militarized police state and surveillance society have been put in place.
Well, Joe, that's a rational thought and a rational explanation. On the other hand, a person could say in reply that, well, if they expected this, then they should really stop all of the bills that are currently in the U.S. Congress that increases the power of agribusiness, and they should be taking steps to make agriculture more diverse, less centralized, to start surrounding cities with smaller farms, to break up the monopoly concentrations that control the food supply and require large transportation distances and all that. They should localize things. But they don't do that. Another thing you could say is, well, if they're really that smart to be able to think ahead about food problems, why can't they think ahead to see the problems they're causing with the dollar? I mean, if the dollar goes, it's the end of the empire. And so why would they be so smart to figure out how to control people because they expect a food crisis, but they're not smart enough to see they're undermining their own empire with these massive budget and trade deficits? And not only that, they're undermining their empire because they're destroying the American economy with all the offshoring of jobs. They've lost manufacturing, industry. They've lost many of the professional service occupations. You now have American college graduates who simply cannot find jobs because they're offshore. This implies an amazing disconnect from reality, because you can never say that it's in the interest of an empire to destroy its economic power. And yet that's precisely what's happening. I have no way of knowing what's going on except that peoples in Western countries are not really very protective of their liberties. They're accepting this. And I guess because they've been made fearful by propaganda. So obviously they're inattentive, or they no longer realize they have to guard their liberties against governments. And this isn't just the fault of the Americans and the British. It's everywhere. You're seeing it everywhere. Though many Europeans are protesting in streets about austerity measures, you see this sort of acceptance of the police state intrusions without people saying, no, wait a minute, I think my liberty is worth, I'd take my risk with a terrorist before I give up my liberty, because then I don't need foreign terrorists. I have domestic terrorists. I've got the TSA. I've got the CIA, the FBI. These are the people who can throw me in a dungeon. I have no recourse to law. And that's far more threatening to populations than Muslim terrorists, even if these Muslim terrorists are really real or are there any substantial numbers. We don't really know that. You might remember there was a BBC documentaries back maybe 5-6 years ago, something about nightmares. And one of the points made was that Al-Qaeda was a creation of an American court case. The Americans were trying two people, and they wanted to lump bin Laden in with them, who had nothing to do with this particular event, and they wanted to use the laws against the mafia. The kind of laws they created to break up the mafia is that you could get the leader even if he had nothing whatsoever to do about some crime that they were prosecuting some mafia guy for. And so they created Al-Qaeda in the court case to say that bin Laden, in order they could link bin Laden with these people they were trying. So if this is the origin of Al-Qaeda, then it's not really there. If you'll notice how the American media has turned the Taliban into Al-Qaeda. So these things are just sort of hokey. They're hokey, and you're certainly right. Something's going on. The agenda is undeclared. We don't know the agenda. It's undeclared.
Okay, well, we have to wrap it up here, Paul, but I want to just thank you for joining us, and I hope we'll get to talk to you again soon.
Sure, Joe. I enjoyed talking to you.
I just want to say a final word on the topic of the possible agenda behind the creeping totalitarianism we are seeing in formerly democratic societies. I think that Paul is correct, that we are dealing with greed and power lust among the few, and the institutionalization of bureaucracy gone bad. But I think there may also be another more conscious agenda at work. I think that these so-called elite are aware that the world as we know it is set to change in rather drastic ways, primarily through climate change. I'm talking about severe weather, earthquakes, volcanoes, perhaps even a mini ice age extending across Eurasia first and then the Americas. There's also been a lot of meteorite reports over the past few years. The resulting social upheaval that such events would provoke would explain the urgency with which governments are imposing a lockdown on public freedoms. The impression I get is that, in terms of the destruction of the world economy, rather than a case of rats deserting a sinking ship, we're looking at rats deliberately scuttling a ship that is about to encounter a major storm, but looting it before they leave. These particular rats, as is their nature, have also been careful to put in place a control system that ensures that the other passengers, that would be you and me, cannot escape. Of course, even the best laid plans go awry, and even the super rich of this world cannot see what the future holds. If I were to give one piece of advice, it would be that the best way any of us can protect ourselves is by informing ourselves and paying close attention to what is going on around us and in our world at large. On that topic, SOTT.net publishes a bi-monthly magazine called The Dot Connector. If you like these reports, then you'll love this magazine. You can find details on how to subscribe on SOTT.net. This is the SOTT Report. We'll be back next week.